Like to have everybody's attention for a moment.
There's a stat. I don't like bringing up stats, but there's one stat about the Panthers.
In the world is James Harden better scorer than Michael Jordan?
No, he's more creative in that.
Traveling is not creative, Brandon.
He doesn't.
You know, no matter what the score is, and they've said it themselves, whether they're up 10, down 20, whatever, they know they can turn it on whenever.
Why did you have to bring up the Cowboys in this conversation?
Lived in Texas for 2 years and just could not stand to watch Cowboys football.
All right, listen up.
Welcome to The Rundown. Here's Desmond Johnson.
The Rundown, Wednesday, trying something a little bit new here. Desmond Johnson with my man Rod Funderburk. Wednesdays are NFL Wednesdays here at The Rundown, where basically we're going to give you a condensed top 3-4 stories going on in the NFL this week. And starting off, Rod, glad to have you with me because you are one of the biggest Dallas Cowboy fans that I know. And as you know, the Cowboys have been making some changes in their quarterback room over the past 7 days. They signed former starter in Cincinnati, Andy Dalton, and released Cooper Rush, the backup quarterback that was there previously. As you know, I've been on record saying I thought that it would be a great place for Cam Newton to go to be a backup in Dallas. Apparently, Andy Dalton listened to what we said and kind of beat us to the punch. But we'll talk about Cam here in just a bit. I wanted to get your thoughts as a Dallas Cowboy fan on Andy Dalton being in Dallas, and do you think this is going to put any kind of pressure on Dak Prescott to sign a long-term deal faster than maybe he wanted to?
Well, Dez has probably the biggest Cowboy fan in the triad. I'll have to be honest with you. I don't think there's going to be any extra pressure on Dak Prescott to sign or get some things done. I think what the Cowboys have done was they have just bought themselves some time, depending on how Dak Prescott wants to act. Now, as a fan, at first, I was like, all right, so what are y'all doing with Dak? Y'all don't want to pay him. You signed Andy Dalton. What in the world is going on? But to be honest with you, Dez, as I thought about it more and more, it's a good move for the organization. The reason that I say that is you want a quality backup quarterback. I'll give you an example. Take Nick Foles. Nick Foles was a quality backup quarterback when he was with the Philadelphia Eagles. Carson Wentz gets hurt. Nick Foles comes in, leads them to the promised land. I'll give you a second example of another backup quarterback, Teddy Bridgewater down with the New Orleans Saints. The starting quarterback, Drew Brees, goes out there. In comes Teddy Bridgewater. What does he do? He wins every last game that he starts, which allows Drew Brees to heal. He doesn't have to heal as quick as he necessarily needs to because they're still winning games. And they come back in and they still make a fairly decent, deep playoff run. So the Cowboys, I think, are taking the page off of those other organizations and saying, hey, let's get a quality backup quarterback. How much more quality can you be when you're talking about Andy Dalton? Played for Cincinnati for 9 years as a starter. He's second in the most passing yards in the franchise history, actually ahead of Boomer Esiason and Carson Palmer. And he's only behind Kenny Anderson, which Ken Anderson played from 1971 to 1986. So you're talking about a quarterback who is also may not be in need of money because he's made over $83 million in his 9 years there. You know what I'm saying?
Dalton's made $83 million.
He's been he's been in the league 9 years and he's made like $83,700,000 and some thousand dollars. But yeah, he's made over $83 million.
Wow.
So now and then of course Andy Dalton's not a dumb guy. He knows the organization that he's come from probably mirrored the Dallas Cowboys the last few years. And what I mean by that is they're an organization that, they were kind of on the bubble of being, 8-8 a lot of times. They're barely, got into the playoffs a few times. They lost each playoff game that they got into. And a lot of that you can blame on the organization, possibly the head coach. Same thing with the Cowboys under Jason Garrett. You could blame his head coaching style for the reason that the Cowboys have been so mediocre and the reason that they haven't really been able to go deep in the playoffs. Now, what has happened? You go and get a coach like Mike McCartney, who used to be the McCartney. Oh, there I go. Yeah, I lost it there. Mike McCartney. Yeah, fumble. But you take a Mike McCartney, man, who has been the offensive coordinator for the Kansas City Chiefs. Then he was the offensive coordinator for the New Orleans Saints. Then he came in, was an offensive coordinator for the San Francisco 49ers. Then went to head coach the Green Bay Packers, where he had Brett Favre toward the end of his career, pretty much drafted Aaron Rodgers, won a Super Bowl with Aaron Rodgers. So he has Super Bowl experience. He's a heck of a head coach. He's great. He's a great offensive mind. and he knows how to work with quarterbacks. So now Andy Dalton's like, this is the kind of guy that I get to work with, the guy who's coached Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers and has won a Super Bowl. See, Andy Dalton's playing it smart. He's going to come in, learn, sit down, make a meal or two, while he's sitting there learning, and then get his stock up. And next year, we'll see him somewhere starting again.
I was going to say, Dak needs to be focused. Dak needs to be totally focused right now, because while at first glance you would think, oh, Andy Dalton's not a better quarterback than Dak Prescott. I don't think it's necessarily about who's the better quarterback. It's going to be, like you said, a matter of convenience and being in the right place at the right time. If something happens to Dak hurts a thumb, twists an ankle, something like that, and Andy gets in there, Andy Dalton has the tools, if he has tools around him, to be a competent quarterback in the NFL. He has, like you said, he's made $83 million in his playing career so far. And they did lead Cincinnati to some playoff appearances underneath head coach Marvin Lewis. So it's not a bad pickup for Dallas. Only $7 million, a one-year deal. Andy,
and that's a $7 million max, which means that Dak would actually have to go out for Andy to come in and get some of those playing incentives.
Right. So, yeah, it's incentive heavy. Now, granted, Dak is pretty durable. I don't recall him missing any starts in the past.
No, he hasn't missed any starts at all.
Yeah. The only one on the clipboard on the side, really, right? I mean, unless something happens to Dak. But, again, my point with Dak is you need to be focused. Be thankful that they didn't bring in someone like Cam Newton. And I want to segue over to Cam because –
before you head to Cam, can I say this right here about Dak Prescott? I want to add this when you say he needs to be focused. I have spoken with some friends, and they know I'm a huge Dallas Cowboys fan. But when it comes to Dak Prescott, I was hoping that Dak Prescott would have participated in the virtual OTAs. The reason why I felt he needed to participate in the virtual OTAs would have kept the Dallas Cowboys from signing someone like Andy Dalton. And what I mean by that is, hey, if I'm going to the virtual OTAs, the Cowboys are like, okay, Dak, he's ready to go. He's rolling with us. But on the flip side of that, in Dak's mind, Dak can say, yeah, I'm going to all the virtual OTAs. It's easy. I'm going all the way to the end. And if you don't sign me or give me the contract that I want or put the verbiage in the contract that I want as it pertains to the extra revenue that could be coming in the NFL, then when it's time for the season to start, guess what? I've been to all the virtual OTAs. There's no backup quarterback for you to put in who has learned what I've already brought to the table and learned for this season. And now Dak Prescott could have said, you know what, season starting, you won't sign me? I'll sit back. I'm not going. See, had he done that, he corners the Cowboys into giving him what he wants because there's no quarterback behind him that can come in and pick up. But now, since he didn't go to virtual OTAs, the Cowboys say, oh, wait a minute. Let's get somebody in here just in case this thing goes further than we want it to. And they get an Andy Dalton who has 9 years of starting in the NFL.
And that was really my thesis towards why Cam Newton should go to Dallas. And of course, that's not going to happen now. But the rundown brought to you by Blue Naples Pizza in Kernersville. They are open for carryout. 1519 Union Cross Road in Kernersville, 336-993-7707. Also brought to you by Body Patterns Fitness and Wellness in Kernersville. They are doing online classes right now daily on their Facebook page that you can definitely do. A lot of boxing, full body type workouts. Definitely check them out if you're sitting on the couch doing nothing. At least you can stay fit and stay active with Body Patterns Fitness. And
Sounds like that's what I need to be doing.
So I did want to segue over to Mr. Cam Newton because it's strange what's happened in the past 2 weeks. It went from a lot of guys still kind of hanging out there like Jameis Winston, Andy Dalton, Cam Newton, to Jadeveon Clowney, who's still unsigned but negotiating with Seattle and a couple other teams. It's gone now to really the only quarterback left on the market is Cam Newton. And Greg Olsen, who's now with the Seahawks, he had some interesting comments about this yesterday, basically saying, he thinks Cam would have been signed already if the Panthers had released him earlier. They didn't do him any favors letting him go when they did. And then literally like a week or so after they released him, the coronavirus stuff really started to hit and affect a lot of sporting leagues. And it's made it where Cam hasn't been able to meet with these teams face to face. They can't get their own doctors on it. What are your thoughts on where Cam should go? Because it sounds like he's holding out for a starter position.
he is holding out for a starter position. And you take an old quarterback like a McNabb. McNabb had some things to say. I don't necessarily agree with what McNabb said under these particular circumstances. McNabb said, hey, how is it that a quarterback like Andy Dalton can come into the Cowboys, get a $7 million contract, MVP, Super Bowl contending quarterback like Cam Newton can't find a job, as well as a Jameis Winston has to take a one-year backup job. And of course, I think McNabb was trying to relate it to race, but in this particular case, I don't think it has to do with race. What it has to do with is Cam is a victim of this coronavirus right now. This coronavirus has said that people have to distance from one another. Organizations are not able to go in and get a medical, physical exam. They're not able to put their hands on Cam Newton the way that they need to do. There's every day you can edit video, you can do whatever you need to video to make it look right. So although Cam is making videos, they can be edited to make it look much better than what he actually is.
It's not saying it's touching him and making sure he's healthy. Because, he's missed, I think 16 games over the past 2 years. Ankle, shoulder. So he's been banged up. No one's denying that. And even in both off seasons, nobody's denying that either. And
even in missing those 16 games, he should have missed more than that the way he played after that Pittsburgh game, when they held his shoulder.
Kind of held on for another 3 or 4 games before he finally got brought out. I look at it like the problem here is that Cam is a different level quarterback than the quarterbacks that were available. So like Jameis Winston never made the playoffs and the 5 years he was with Tampa Bay. Andy Dalton made the playoffs, but never won a playoff game, never won his division, if I'm not mistaken, and was just a different level. Meanwhile, Cam Newton, former league MVP, 4 years in the playoffs out of 7 years playing, 3-time division champion, went to the Super Bowl, has won the NFC championship, and was considered at one point in time by his peers the greatest player in the game at that time after the 2015 season. He has had some injuries and he has been banged up, but I think a lot of this has to do with look at what Andy Dalton just got. He got $7 million to be the backup in Dallas. Clearly, if they could choose between Andy Dalton and Cam Newton to be the backup, I think Jerry Jones would have picked Cam Newton. But Cam has basically said he wants to be a starter. He feels like he should be a starter in the league, and he's having to wait basically for somebody to get hurt, which could happen in training camp, which usually happens in training camp. Somebody gets hurt, or the preseason, or whatever it may be. Do you think that Cam is willing to sit out the 2020 season if a starting role does not pop up? Because I don't see him at this point taking the stance of, I want to be a starter. I want to be a starter. I deserve starter money. I'm Cam Newton. And then we get to like week 2 or week 3 and he's still not signed. He's like, you know what? I'll go sit on the bench in Las Vegas, or I'll go sit on the bench in New York or wherever, just so that I'm employed. I don't think he's that type. I think he's the type that would sit out a year and wait and come back in 2021. What are your thoughts on that real quick, Rod?
Yeah, I think Cam needs to be prepared to possibly sit out. If he wants a starting job, he's got to understand that he had some injuries, and these organizations are just not going to come and just hire him, give him a starting job without having the opportunity to put their hands on him. And although I want Cam Newton to do well, I don't think he's going to be a starter this upcoming year until he can prove to everyone that he is healthy. So what Cam Newton, has to do, or what he should do, is he should do exactly what Marcus Mariota did, who is now the backup to David Carr in Las Vegas for the Raiders. He should do exactly what Andy Dalton is doing, who is now the backup to Dak over at the Dallas Cowboys. What Jameis Winston is doing, who's the backup to Sean Payton in New Orleans Saints. These guys are going to get some great coaching under their belt. They're going to learn a lot of football. And to me, if Cam Newton does sit out because he wants to be a starter, and don't get me wrong, he deserves to be a starter. But if he is going to sit out and not go to a team and learn something, he could actually set himself back mind-wise and football mentality-wise and football IQ-wise, because he does not sit behind a good player or a heck of a coach or offensive coordinator that continue to develop your mind and your on-the-field thoughts. And that's just my thing about Cam.
I think once teams can get their hands on him and check him out, I think he'll get signed pretty quick. I don't think he'll have to sit out the year. And actually, it kind of saddens my heart, but the place that I think would probably best fit him is the Denver Broncos. They have a quarterback
Yeah, they drafted him last year.
Yeah, he's like a second-round pick. I mean, I don't know how high they are on him, but this isn't something Denver hasn't done before. I mean, Denver drafted Tim Tebow in the first round. Took him to the playoffs, and then when they got a chance to sign a former MVP in Peyton Manning, they signed him, and they ended up going to 2 Super Bowls because of it. Denver just drafted 2 wide receivers. They still have a good defense, pretty solid offensive line. I think Cam could slip in there and start immediately and have success. And you'd have Pat Mahomes versus Cam Newton twice a year. So, I mean, the NFL would love that.
That'd be nice.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's a possibility. I think New England's still kind of out there, even though we keep hearing Jared Stidham's going to be the starter. I don't really buy that. Like, I don't know if that's the way they want to go. If Cam Newton becomes available for teams to start giving physicals again as these camps start opening back up, I could see somebody making a move. Maybe somebody we're not even thinking about, making a move like Chicago or somebody like that. Nick Foles was signed to be the starter, but I mean, if you could choose between Nick Foles and Cam Newton, who are you going to go with up in Chicago? I mean, that Cam would be perfect in Chicago. So we'll kind of see. There's some other spots out there.
Jacksonville could be a potential spot.
Yeah, exactly. Gardner Minshew is the starter right now, so they traded Nick Foles away, but that's really all they have. We'll find out over the next couple of weeks what's going to happen with Cam, but it'll be really interesting to see what happens and what team picks him up.
And I would be in favor of seeing Cam out in San Diego, to be honest with you.
Yeah, now they drafted the quarterback Justin Herbert from Oregon. But if they could bring Cam in on a 1-year deal, let him sit behind him maybe if he's not ready to, because I heard Herbert's not as polished as Tua and Burrows was. So
yeah, in my opinion,
be a possibility.
In my opinion, he is not as polished as those other 2 that you just mentioned. And just for that reason alone, being a rookie coming into the NFL, the speed of the game can be so overwhelming to these rookies as playing quarterback. You let a guy like Cam Newton come in and you look at that big personality and you look at the way Cam plays, and then you take in all the information you can take in and you learn as much as you can on that offense and prepare to be the starter for San Diego one day. But yeah, I wouldn't have an issue with seeing Cam Newton out at San Diego.
Okay, and then real quick, our third topic for
or LA Chargers. I'm sorry,
the LA Chargers. Yeah, they're always going to San Diego. So they probably should just move back. Did want to mention that the NFL Greatest Team Ever bracket the tournament will begin next week. 64 teams. If you want to check out the teams and the seedings, you can go to sportscarolinamonthly.com right now. Go up to the top of the homepage. There is a tab that says Greatest NFL Team Ever. Click that. It's a full 64 team bracket. We have it all seeded out. The 1 seeds are the 85 Chicago Bears, the 89 San Francisco 49ers, the 1992 Dallas Cowboys, and the 1978 Pittsburgh Steelers. So we got a lot of guests lined up to do that. Rod, Brandon Blakeney from WXII, Earl Marks from Worldwide Sports Network, Brian Snow from Snowman in the Morning, Ryan Snow from IMG Learfield Sports. So we got a lot of different guys that are going to be grouping up into pairs to kind of bring this all down to a Final Four and a championship game. So we're happy to bring that to you throughout the spring and the rest of the summer from sportscarolinamonthly.com. So the Miami Dolphins have announced that they're going to, they have a plan for social distancing in case they do have a 2020 season. Their stadium, Hard Rock Stadium in Miami, seats like 78,000 people. Their plan that they put out earlier this week, basically they would limit attendance to 15,000 fans. The concession stands would be closed. You would order your food from your seats. There'd be an exit plan, so rows would be exiting individually as opposed to a mad rush in and out of the stadium. My question, Rod, because we both do play-by-play and color commentary for high school sports around here, so I'm kind of keeping an eye on what they're planning for the fall, because I'm hoping that we figure out some way to be able to do fall sports. What's your take on, can social distancing work in the NFL for NFL fans? And are the Dolphins kind of forgetting that, yes, they can open up the stands to fans, but there's still going to be this element of, do the fans want to be in a place with 15,000 people when we get to September and October without masks and, a vaccine or whatever it may be? So can social distancing work for something like the NFL that attracts 50, 60, 70,000 fans each week to all these different stadiums?
Des, I think it will be very difficult. It's possible that it could work, but you're talking about only 15,000 fans in a stadium. Then, how are you going to separate them as far as seating goes? I'm just curious, is there a certain number of rows up? There are a certain number of rows apart from one another?
That part, I don't think they said. Yeah, I think they just said limit to 15,000. But I guess you could space out where people are sitting if it's just 15,000.
Do you separate your family? I mean, if you come in with your family who you're used to dealing and living with, what about when it's time to smack high fives and all that good stuff? I think, if you go that route, you're talking about having a different experience there in the stadium. And I don't think the experience would probably be as fun for the people in the stadium, to be honest with you. They'll be looking around at a half empty stadium. I mean, the stadium won't even be a quarter of the way full. Yeah. So that in itself could potentially, say people say, hey, I'm not having a good time at all. But then the other deal is, depending on how far this coronavirus takes us and where we are scientifically with it, if we're not able and ready to handle this thing and push it out or have a vaccine for it, or if we're not moving forward on the coronavirus to defeat it, you're talking about fans aren't even going to want to come to the games. Because I'll be honest with you, as a minority watching how the coronavirus is affecting various people and, people in different communities, I don't want to go to a stadium, whether it's 15,000, 20,000, 100,000 or 2,000. I don't want to go to it, because there's a lot that goes on in the stadium. From sneezing, coughing,
it's not the cleanest
high fives.
Yeah.
No, I mean, you look down on the floor, you see all kinds of messes in the stadium. People drink. People drink to the point that they can't hold their liquor and may have to regurgitate. I mean, we've seen that. You know what I'm saying? So,
when I first heard this plan, I was like, okay, I commend them for trying to figure something out. But I was having a conversation on Facebook last night and mentioned something that just kind of came to mind while we were talking about some of the similar things. And it was like, all these people that are, well, not all these people, some of these people that are protesting, wanting stuff to reopen back up, bars and hair salons, barbershops and things like that, restaurants and stuff. It's not so much their freedoms are being infringed like they're implying. It almost comes off that they're just not happy not having people service them, the people that cut their hair, the people that make their hamburgers and stuff. Right. They're not there anymore, so it's an inconvenience and they want it back. But that ignores the entire danger of why all of the society pretty much got shut down in the first place. This is a dangerous virus that's out here, and at count right now, this is May the 6th. Over 65,000 have been killed. The White House has said that
I think it's over 71. Actually,
is it over 71 now? See, I haven't even checked the day to see where it is. Yeah. And some of these southern states are starting to open back up, and we're seeing spikes in cases immediately after they open back up. And luckily, here in North Carolina, a bit of a more planned out response to opening things back up in phases. As I mentioned, we do play-by-play for high school football in the fall. So I'm sitting here looking at it like, are they going to be able to pull off high school football? Are they even going to have school, in August? And I'm thinking if they're doing distance learning still like they're doing now here in North Carolina online, you could do athletics still and do the same model. You limit the amount of attendance, and it becomes even more important to get out those games via broadcast or whatever way, video, audio, whatever it may be. And I think what may end up happening here is that we see this boom of broadcasters, online broadcasters, schools that are broadcasting, things like that on their own, just to get the content out to their fans. And then, have enough fans come in to cover the gate and, some of that kind of stuff. But I'm thinking the way it's going right now, especially the lower level, like in high school football might be able to be played with a certain number of masks and things of that sort. And then you have people like us that would be broadcasting those games or the top games out to the communities. It could turn into an opportunity. So I'm kind of looking at it, thinking of it that way. But in terms of social distancing in the NFL, I don't know if it can work. I know I don't want to see an NFL game with no fans. WrestleMania taught me that, that I don't have any interest in seeing NFL with 0 fans. And now, since all the states kind of control all this stuff, you got situations where like Florida has different rules right now than say New York. So like, watching a Giants game would be different than watching a Dolphins game, because in a Dolphins game, they may have 15,000 people in the stands. In a Giants game, they might be playing in an empty arena. So it's like, or empty stadium. So it's a different type of thing. I don't know how they're going to do this. Luckily, we still got a couple of months to go before we really need to figure it out. Training camps and stuff would open or scheduled to open middle of July. So we'll see what happens with all that.
Yeah, we do have a long way to go with this thing. And one of the things that I'm worried about on the high school level is the player safety. That's going to be one of the most important pieces, is making sure the players are safe.
Could you play football with a mask on, like in a helmet? Would you be able to play football? Because you played football.
Nah, I mean, you'd be more comfortable with it off. I'm telling you that right now. As a ball player, you'd say the heck with it and you'd take it off.
But if they made you wear the mask, is it possible?
Well, that's just it. I'm thinking if you're making them wear masks, then you don't have enough testing kits to make sure the players are safe. And that's my thing about the player safety. Test the players who are going to be playing, even if you make the stadium, limited on how many people can come there. The players, it's hard to play football using social distancing rules. I mean, just really is. Just the nature of the game.
That's my thought. It's like, how are you supposed to do this? There's 50-some kids out here playing, ramming into each other every play, and it's like everyone's supposed to be 6 feet apart.
Right.
How are you supposed to do it?
So to keep those kids safe, the first thing you have to do is get the testing kits to them to weed out who may have the coronavirus that's a player, because you can't have that player transmitting it to his teammates.
Yeah, they can't play.
Transmitting it to the opponent and that nature. So are we ready as a country, as a society, to supply every high school with testing kits by August and really by the end of July? Because that's when football starts. That's when the contact starts. So are we ready as a country to have that many testing kits to do that?
The sad thing is it would have to break down by school system to do that, like to be able to do it. But then you've got schools playing other schools in different school systems. Kids in Forsyth County are playing against kids in Guilford County and Davidson County and stuff. And those are 3 different school systems there.
Yeah. What about like last year when you had to do the game, you had to travel to Asheville?
Right. Yeah. How does that work? So, I mean, there's a lot to dissect. So I don't know if they're gonna be able to pull that off. They might be able to do it in NBA. Some of the other sports like golf, tennis, where you're already not standing beside somebody. NASCAR is about to kick off on the 17th, if I'm not mistaken. They're going to start racing actual races again with no fans in attendance. And they were doing iRacing before that. So we'll see.
And the NASCAR driver should be fine, because there's no better place to social distance yourself than in your car alone.
Right, exactly.
I mean? That's perfect. Which is completely opposite of what football is.
So we're going to head out here. That's an NFL version of the rundown for Wednesday, May the 6th, 2020. Once again, keep in mind the NFL Greatest Team Ever bracket rounds 1 and 2 begin next week. Subscribe to the Sports Corner Monthly YouTube channel for alerts on that. And we will see you with another episode of the rundown next week.